the chairman of the planning committee. We're going to introduce the top table now. For the benefit of those watching at home, they will do it themselves.
I'm Phil Davis. I'm the member for Purton Dippens, Vice Chairman of the Planning Committee.
My name's Pardip Sharma and I'm the solicitor today for the Planning Committee.
My name's Kelly Harris. I'm the lead planning manager for the council.
My name's Helen Bembo. I am the development management team manager for the council.
I'm Charlotte Billingham. I'm a technical support officer.
Thank you, members. Let's move straight forward into the agenda then, please. The minutes of the last meeting in December, they have been circulated. Does anybody want to make any comment? Thank you. We can therefore agree they're a true record. Thank you very much for that. I'll sign the comment in a minute. Apologies. Caroline, have we got any apologies, please?
I've received apologies from councillors Boyle and Reid.
Thank you, Caroline. Agenda item number 3, declarations of interest. Does any member have an interest to declare? No, thank you very much. We're now moving to the determination of the planning applications. First application this evening is 22/00727 FUL, and it's the Saunders Brothers Salvage, Prestwood Drive, Stoughton, Staffordshire. Ellen, can you just summarise the application for us, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to Saunders Brothers Salvage, which is a 1.4 hectare property on the southern side of Prestwood Drive, just to the west of the Stourbridge Canal. There are 2 fixed buildings on the property near to Prestwood Drive, as well as an electrical pylon to the northeast corner of the property. The rest of the land is occupied by salvage vehicles, access paths and storage containers. The property is surrounded on all sides by mature trees. The vehicle salvage business was granted a certificate of established use in 1991 after several decades of operation. The area within the property subject to this retrospective application, currently being utilised as self-storage yard, is on the eastern property boundary adjacent to the canal. There are 31 storage containers with an adjacent hard standing area. To the east of the Stourbridge Canal is a conservation area, and to the south of the property is a biodiversity alert site, identified locally as having nature conservation value and the potential of being substantive nature conservation value through appropriate management. The site is within the Greenbelt, and the proposed development is considered to be inappropriate development as set out in Policy GB1 of the adopted core strategy, as well as within the MPPF. Whilst the application contends that the storage containers have less of an impact than the previous use of the portion of the site for vehicle dismantling, this is not considered to outweigh the harm to the Greenbelt, the loss of openness, and as well as the harm considered to the visual amenity of the adjacent canal conservation area. As the retrospective application is therefore contrary to policies GB1 and EQ3 of the core strategy, Chapter 16 of the MPPF, it is recommended for refusal. I'll just go through some of the slides and members can familiarise themselves with the site. We did undertake a site visit to this one yesterday. So this slide shows the access to the site, and you can see on the right hand side the storage containers subject to this application. So there's a row along the left hand side and then they return back into the site. That view gives you a clearer indication of the L shape that's been formed by the containers. The view on the right hand side is from the canal towpath. Having visited the site yesterday, this has changed as a green shielding has been installed inside of the fence to screen the tops of the containers that you can see from that view, and again there on those 2 views. So that has been screened by some kind of temporary netting and shielding that has been located on the site. And this final plan shows you the location of the containers. You can see the Stourbridge Canal arm adjacent, and then the access to the site, which is underneath the actual pylon that's located there to the north along Prestwood Drive. Again, Chair, recommendation is for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. We've got two people speaking on this matter. The first one speaking for the application is the planning agent, John Jowett. John, you've got 3 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Since this proposal is retrospective, it does give everyone the opportunity to see its effect. If this proposal fails, of course, the site will revert to a scrapyard in this area. And at your site visit, you will have seen that the containers are new and in good condition. It's much tidier than the rest of the site, and there are, of course, fewer visitors. The area used for the containers was, of course, previously covered in scrap metal. Now, as you've heard, the key issue is openness. A landscape and visual impact assessment is submitted with the application, written by a qualified and experienced consultant. And this states that the containers are, and I quote, likely to have had no detrimental effects on the landscape and visual aspects in comparison to what was there before. In terms of the limited number of identified viewpoints, there even seems to have been a slight improvement. Now, your report doesn't actually address this. Nowhere is this point made in the report or questioned, let alone assessed by someone with appropriate qualifications. Consequently, no justification is provided for this statement, upon which you are recommended to refuse the application, that the containers have substantially reduced the openness of the greenbelt. If that's not the case, then it can't be an appropriate development, and you should support the application. As a result of the findings of our consultant, there's also no justification that the proposal would cause harm to the conservation area. As it stands, I'd suggest that the conclusions of your report therefore appear unreasonable, showing no consideration of the evidence provided. That evidence, and I trust that of your own eyes, having seen the site, will have shown that the containers are a vast improvement over the lawful alternative use as a scrapyard. Further benefits of the proposal include that visits to the site connected to the storage facility are rare, compared to heavy vehicles regularly visiting the scrapyard. Finally, approval of the proposal will allow you to condition the use, hours of operation, and the height of the containers, unlike the present situation. And I hope you'll therefore support the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jowett. Speaking against the application is Councillor Lynn Hinchley.
In favour of the application.
Sorry, yes. I do apologise.
Thank you. Firstly, can I thank the chairman and the members of the planning committee who took the time to visit the site on Monday morning. You brought the sunshine to Kimber and we had a lovely day. Thank you. This scrapyard business was established in the 1950s when conservation and environment were not so important. Vehicles of the time could be repaired and maintained by their owners, often using spare parts from the scrapyards. If you needed a component for your vehicle, one would go to the Saunders brothers and often find what was needed. I and my family have been customers over the years. The market for spare parts has slowed down now, with improved vehicles manufactured and environmental regulations. And for this reason, Saunders Brothers have had to look at their business model in a different light. Rather than considering eventual closure, they look for diversity. They saw a niche market for domestic and small business storage using portable metal storage units. Naively, they believed and replacing rusting metal lorries and cars with metal containers would not require planning approval. especially as the space used was visibly more pleasing to the eye and environment. Therefore, proceeded to prepare the site and install the units. The units are not visited frequently. There is no impact on the volume of traffic in the area or on the environment. In fact, the aesthetic look of the area is much more enhanced by the siting of the storage units. They cannot be seen by the canal or the towpath as they are screened by a green fencing, which is permanent, and are not visible until you enter the site. These storage units provide a valuable local service for members of the public who would otherwise have to travel many miles to find alternative storage space, which would, of course, have a greater impact on the environment. This business has been trading for over 70 years, and to my knowledge, there have been no complaints regarding their premises. In fact, it has always been a pleasure to visit the site and see the wonderful birds, butterflies and wild animals that visit.
Yeah, thank you, councillor. You've
Thank
gone
you.
over your
All I
3
can say,
minutes.
Mr. Chairman and fellow councillors, I recommend that the planning application be approved. Thank you.
Thank you. I forgot to mention the late notice. If you look at the back of it, you'll see there's a comment there from Councillor Sisley, who is also a ward member, who himself thinks that this application should be approved. There's also comments on the late list that I want to ask Helen to refer to now, particularly the comments from the planning agent. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Yeah, to come back on some of the points that have been raised by the speakers, please, if you don't mind. Yes, the scrap use is the established use on the site. There's no argument from officers' perspective. There's been a lawful certificate granted for that, and it's clear from the site history that it's been an established scrap business for many, many decades. The established use of the site does allow for scrap metal to be stored in the area that's shown on the plan in front of you, which relates to the containers and where the containers have been located. The difference being, obviously, with scrap metal and that being sited on the site, there's a transient nature to that comes and goes and moves. And in terms of permanence, it's not considered the same from an officer perspective as the bulk of the storage containers, and obviously they're not going to move, they are located permanently there. It's worth saying that obviously the survey work and the consultant work that was done and carried out has been assessed by the case officer, and the judgment has been made in terms of the impact on the visual side of the assessment, but also the openness of the green belt. It's worth being very clear, these are two different things, the impact on openness and the impact on visual amenity. So whilst the report may have concluded that there's no impact on visual impacts and amenity, and may have come to the conclusion that the containers are visually an improvement to scrap metal being stacked on that side of the site, that doesn't address the openness issue. They're two very separate issues. And openness in terms of greenbelt policy, both national policy and locally adopted policy, is clear that buildings and structures within the greenbelt are not appropriate. It's inappropriate development, and no very special circumstances exist to outweigh that harm. So that is the position of officers, and that's why the recommendation is before you this evening, to refuse, because we cannot take away from the fact it's in the greenbelt and therefore the openness is affected. Just to come back on a few other points, in terms of highway issues, we raise no concerns with highway issues. We accept that there's probably going to be less transport and trips, so that's not something that we raised a concern about. But I think that's covered those issues, Chair. Thank you.
There was one issue, Helen, that I just wanted to try and clarify. It clearly states here that a landscape impact analysis, but makes no examination of it by a qualified individual. Was that impact analysis examined by a qualified officer, please?
Thank you. Yeah, through you, Chair. The case officer is a chartered member of the Royal Town Planning Institute. So in terms of skill set, I would consider her qualified in order to make that assessment. And obviously that assessment relates to visual amenity, and what we're concerned about is openness. So yes, Chair, I can give you some comfort on that. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Ellen. Okay, I'm going to open this up to members now. Members, have you got any questions, please? Ian, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I was one of those who was able to attend yesterday, and I can see that this looks a lot better than much of the rest of the site. That may or may not be sufficient to sway people's opinion on this. What I would like to clarify is, if we give this permission, could they just remove the containers and revert to using that area as scrapyard, or would that require a new planning application, please?
I can take that turn, Chair. Chair, yes, there is the position clearly here is if you do not actually grant a planning permission tonight for the proposed development, then the land could revert back to its lawful use. And as the report actually indicates, the lawful use is that of a scrapyard. Oh, sorry, what was the question?
The question was, if we grant it,
oh, sorry,
they then remove them and return to scrapyard. That's all I was asking.
Okay. Yeah, so let me just get the position clear. So, Chairman, if it is the case that you actually granted planning permission today, for the containers, that represents a new use. And clearly, if an application came in for any other use, including, that of a scrapyard, then clearly that is actually open, to the planning authority to determine any other application entirely on its planning merits. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Ellen, go ahead.
I just refer to 554, please, in your notes. At the bottom of page 14, it says that neither use is sympathetic to the character of the canal. I have walked this section of the canal myself several times. The noise and the nuisance emanating from a scrapyard is far greater than the proposed use that we are looking at today. I am surprised that the Stourbridge Canal Conservation Area document has said this when this is an established use from 1950, as we've just heard from Lynn Hingley. I would just say to you that having walked this section of the canal and experienced the noise and nuisance from the scrapyard, to me, this is infinitely preferable. And I note it says in the report, it is my opinion that neither use is sympathetic to the character of the canal. This is a broad statement from somebody who is ignoring the industrial use of canals and the reason that they are built. I think we have to be very serious when we look at this industrial use of canals and bear in mind the proximity of other industrial units to canals across our area when we are looking at this application. Thank you.
Can I just ask a question there, Penny? The canal, or the part of the canal we are looking at tonight, is in a conservation area. It's not in an industrial zone. So I think we shouldn't treat the canal like all canals. Come back then.
I'm sorry. History will tell you that canals were principal use was for industry, and that's part of the major reason they were built. We have on our doorstep in Fort Houses and Bilbrook industrial units, and people understand and know why they were created. I think we have to be sympathetic to this, although this is a conservation area. I suspect in the 1950s, when this was first introduced as a scrapyard, it was not in a conservation area. Please correct me if I am wrong.
Through you, Chair. Thank you. Yes, just to come back, obviously the canal is designated as a conservation area and that would have been done after the scrapyard, of course. But I think I understand what you're saying about the industrial heritage and obviously the fact that canals were purposefully built for that reason at that time, and this use has been there. Now, this use doesn't connect to the canal. There's no interconnection between the two. In fact, part of the argument that the planning agents and applicants are making is the very fact that this turns its back on the canal in order not to impact on the industrials. So I think trying to make a link between the industrial unit and use that's there in the canal is a bit of a disconnect in terms of the fact it doesn't really link to the canal itself. They're very distinct uses and the conservation area status would have gone in after, because over time the use of the canal has turned from industrial to leisure and now people use them for bikes. We saw quite a few cyclists while we were there on the site visit and people walk up and down there because it's a leisure use and purpose now, not taking away from the historic heritage at all, but that's not the way it functions at the moment, hence the conservation area designation. And just one final point, obviously the scrapyard, it probably is noisy and creates an issue. That's not being removed, that remains as well as the containers. So just to make that point clear. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Helen. Yes, come back then.
I'm not very satisfied with that answer in some ways, as you will appreciate, because as a frequent walker of canals myself, I have my own experiences. However, has any survey been taken about the impact on local businesses and local people if this storage facility is closed? We are supposed to be encouraging everyone to be a prosperous district. We are supposed to be encouraging small businesses and enterprises, and some of these containers, I'm sure, are being used by local business. Has any measurement been taken of the impact on local businesses if this planning application is refused?
Through you, Chair. Yes, it's a very valid point, and we're certainly not here to stifle business and to make it difficult for people to operate a business. What we did do as case officers was request some information about how this particular part of the site was required in order to make the business more viable and diversify. That wasn't forthcoming despite requests from officers to demonstrate that information to us, so we can only assume that there isn't a necessity. When we were there, all of the units are occupied. It's all for domestic use, furniture storage, that kind of thing. The site owners explained that quite clearly to myself and members on the site. So we're not questioning the need for the business to diversify, but we haven't seen any evidence of that demonstrated to us to justify the step away from the established scrap business. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Coe.
Thank you, Chairman. Listening to all parties in this, I accept that the applicant is attempting to diversify because he's obviously been struggling with his scrap business, and the containers are part of that diversification. However, I can't go against our planning policies. Now, what officers have said is, I'm looking at one of the reasons for refusal is emphasising the loss of openness. Now, openness is two factors. One is visual, and yes, we've heard tonight that it has no visual effect. You've looked at it from the canal and it's screened, as we can see on the slides. But the other aspect of openness is spatial. Now, what spatial means, that's the actual area that it has to remain open. And it's not with these containers, because the containers are a change of use. Yes, this has been established as a scrapyard for 70 years, and I have a lot of sympathy with the argument about the businesses, etc. But I do know on my own area, I've had incidents of similar arguments to put caravans on sites and surround it with effects that doesn't affect the impact visually. But it's the spatial argument, the fact that it affects the openness. And we start deviating from our planning policies, then we're opening a can of worms, in my view, So I'm sorry, I'm afraid, although I've got sympathy for the argument, I can't support approving this. I have to go along with the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Cope. We've moved now from the questions. So has anybody else got any further questions before we go into the debate part of this application? No? Okay then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to say, make a comment. I was part of the site visit yesterday, and I was very, very surprised with what I saw. We walked along the towpath there, and if you were a sort of a visitor to the area, you wouldn't have any clue that there was a scrapyard there when you look from the towpath at the fence. It's been aesthetically, it's very, 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 very good. And I know, obviously, we've heard it does sort of clash with some planning rules and what have you. But I applaud the enterprise of the owners and the company there. And as I say, the aesthetics of look of the site is, in my view, excellent. And I'm in sympathy with them, and I am minded to support the application in those grounds.
Well, I also was at the site visit, so I'll make a few comments and observations as well then. Yeah, I mean, I drove along to the site. You couldn't see the scrap card business from the road. It's a very minor road. It's covered. It's been there operating for 60, 70 years quite lawfully. And then when we had a walk round and walked onto the canal towpath, what you've got is the fencing that you can see there that's now been covered by some green mesh, and it completely obscures the units that are the blue units that are behind there. And from the canal towpath, you can't really see anything offensive. But I asked myself the question yesterday, if the scrapyard wasn't there, if this was virgin greenbelt land, would we be entertaining the container business planning application here tonight? And the answer is no. There is a lawful permission there for them to carry out salvage operations, scrapyard, that type of activity. And yes, this container unit business is tidier, definitely tidier than what the scrapyard would look and be. But the scrapyard is lawful. There's nothing we can do about that even if we wanted to. It's a lawful business, been operating for 70 years, and it will operate for another 70 years as far as I'm concerned. Just because aesthetically those storage units are better than looking at scrap vehicles is not a good reason to say yes to granting permission for this application. Therefore, and I do sympathise with the owners, they've done a very good job there, but I can't support the application, and I too will be saying that I agree with the recommendations to refuse the application. I hope now, good, yes. Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Chairman. Unfortunately, I didn't make the site meeting because I came to the first site meeting of the day. I hit a pothole and wrecked a tyre, which cost me a considerable amount of money. So that's a shame that I didn't go. But from what I've heard, people are obviously been very impressed by what they see. But of course, you know, they're following, we've probably got to follow policy. But I think it just goes to show how important a site visit is. And I'll stop at that.
Any other member want to make any comments? Victoria.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to say to Councillor Steele that if you had an accident yesterday in my county division and you'd like some help with that, by all means, get in touch with me. Going back to the application, I absolutely sympathise with the agent and the applicant. Fortunately, whatever we come to, whatever we say, whatever sort of potential threat there is that this might revert to a scrapyard, this is inappropriate development in the Greenbelt, and we cannot ignore that. And as Councillor Cope and the chairman stated as well, you know, we simply cannot just ignore policy like that, especially with the spatial element of things. So I'm afraid I won't be supporting it.
Members, if nobody else wishes to speak, I haven't had a proposal made this evening. Just a moment.
There is just one factor that we, as officers, wanted to actually mention, that if there is an alternative motion, given the nature of this application, it's Greenbelt, in the officer's view, it's inappropriate development. So if you do come to an alternative motion, you should actually note that this is an application which we will have to refer to the Secretary of State to ask the question, you know, does the Secretary of State actually want to call in, and therefore the decision-making process is then actually out of the hands of the committee in the event that that application is actually called in. I just wanted to make sure that members were just aware of that fact, Chair.
Okay, well, there's only one proposal on the. Councillor Allen.
I want to make the alternative proposal, please. That this
I'm ready to listen to it.
Be approved. I'm doing that because of my understanding about openness and spatial awareness. I regard a scrapyard spatial awareness as being a height as well as a width, and to be having walked this canal towpath several times, the noise, the heavy vehicles, the nuisance, the lack of proximity of local residents. I note we've had no local residents' complaints about this. We've had support from the local member. I think spatial awareness is something which I'm very conscious of. And if members looking at the photographs will appreciate that any heavy vehicle driving in and out of that site, and parking there for lengths of time, and the associated machinery with the scrapyard, spatial awareness for me about that is far greater than what's proposed in this plan. I think from my own point of view, and we all have our own understanding about the NPPF because it is vague in places, and I'm very well aware of it, I think this is an opportunity to use our own discretion. I see the applicant's response to the need in their community, and see the need for us to be looking at community, looking at local business, looking at local residents, hearing the views of local councillors. And I do believe myself that this is an infinitely preferable use of this particular site. I spent part of my youth in scrapyards because we couldn't afford new cars. I'm very well aware of the height and the depth and the spatial awareness that is lost in a scrapyard. And I think we have to be very careful when we are looking at applications like this and thinking about what spatial awareness actually means to us. And to me, the height, the depth, the number of vehicles piled on top of each other in the scrapyard, the cranes that are associated and the heavy machinery with that is a far bigger nuisance in spatial awareness than what is being proposed at the moment. I'm sorry to have to speak across the officers because I know they're doing their bit, but I think we have to use our own common sense and discretion sometimes and our own understanding about what a scrapyard actually involves and how it is managed, maintained, and what spatial awareness that occupies.
Thank you. This is inappropriate development within the Greenbelt, full stop. To get round that, we have to provide very special circumstances to allow that type of development. Can you just explain to me what you consider to be the very special circumstances? Thank you.
Special circumstances. Local community need is something which I regard as a special circumstance, although I'm aware it's not in the list. Okay, I'll hear you. I think the lack of objection on the part of all the persons who have been actually aware of this application. There is no objections here from those kind of bodies or persons about highways or parking or impact on the character is the one thing which seems to be the particular issue. I'm looking at 561 at the moment, EQ3. Minimising the loss and disturbance of historic materials. I think that's been done by actually what's happened. Using appropriate materials and ensuring alterations are reversible. This plan is reversible. It could go back to being a scrapyard. The position is extant. Using appropriate materials, it has already been said that the storage containers have less height, volume and capacity than the scrapyard. They're saying that in 562, that's an incongruous form of development harmful to the visual amenity of the area. The visual amenity of the Stourbridge Canal has many different facets. It has an industrial facet, it has a residential facet, there's properties backing onto it. It has an impact on properties that neighbour it in terms of a residential area and industry. I don't regard the containers being blue, and probably if they were green, we wouldn't be having this argument, I think. So I have to say to you that EQ3 is adhering to me, to these principles. I note that at 572, the nearest property is 175 metres away. That is a considerable distance. I note that the highways have had no objection to this, and there's no impact on the public highway. I know the entrance to this, and then realise it's got no impact. So to me, the visual amenity of this surrounding area, which is mentioned in the, where am I looking? 611, is improved by this development, not, and I think it's something which, you know, we ought to think about very seriously. Visual openness to me has been improved by this because I'm very well aware that scrapyards have a much bigger visual intrusion in the landscape.
Thank you very much, Penny. I'm going to take advice on whether those are very special circumstances. So,
Chair, I will actually ask, you know, Helen to add a few points. But, you know, in terms of, you know, some of the issues that you have actually mentioned, Councillor, they don't actually relate to green belt issues. You know, you spoke earlier on about, you know, the need for the local need. But, you know, where is the evidence, you know, of local need for this particular use? And there are a number of other factors that you actually mentioned. You see, the key aspect here is, as actually set out in the report, you've got to look at the you know, not just the visual openness, but also the spatial openness as well. And I think yourself, Councillor, you made it absolutely clear. There's a difference here. You know, the presence of buildings, right, on land. It doesn't matter if you can't see them, it doesn't matter if I can't see them, you know, the mere presence, you know, of buildings on land constitutes, and has a spatial impact, and that's actually clearly set out, in case law. And as a consequence of that, it's inappropriate development. Now, I fully appreciate, the steer members that you are providing. You've got a harmful use here, and you've got a use here which looks, less harmful, and therefore, you wish to actually, you're minded to grant planning permission. But at the end of the day, your starting point really has to be, look at your policies, and if your policies actually stipulate that unless you can demonstrate clear special circumstances and there is no harm to openness, which obviously includes spatial facets to it, then you're departing from your policy. So those are just a few sort of legal points. Do you want to add anything?
Thank you, Pardon. I just want to take it back to basics of what we're talking about here, and I think Councillor Cope sort of started this off. The key thing here is, I understand and I'm totally sympathetic on a pragmatic level that it looks better, but unfortunately planning doesn't have a policy on whether it looks better or not, because there's simple reasons that we don't want to allow landowners to let their land fall into disrepute in order to get something that looks better. It's a very fundamental of planning, and I absolutely appreciate why you feel it would look better, but I just need to comment just for the safety of the sort of decision-making process about what is a VSC and what isn't. So just first of all, obviously, I know you said a number of times that it's about having discretion. Planning committee and making decisions is not about discretion, it's about implementing planning policy. And it's absolutely clear in case law that goes all the way to the Supreme Court that openness is both visual and spatial. We accept the visual impact may not be as difficult as what it was before, but as a matter of fact, it is fact that there is a spatial impact here because there is something on the land. It is having that impact. So therefore, it's inappropriate, therefore, very special circumstances are needed. Now, that hasn't been demonstrated to us as far as the case officer has put here. And just to be clear, it's spatial openness, not spatial awareness. They're very, very different concepts that we need to be mindful of in what planning law says. And there is a lot of planning law on this. What I would say in what you've identified as potential very special circumstances, yes, need could in some cases be a very special circumstance, but we haven't had that demonstrated. So we can't make that be a reason because we would like it to be. We don't have that information before us to put in the planning balance. The second one, just in terms of due process, members of planning committee cannot take the level of objection to an application or otherwise as a material planning consideration. Again, that is case law. So if members are minded to agree with that motion, you need to be clear in your decision making for any legal challenge we may face that you have not taken that into consideration in coming to your view. So hopefully that's clarified the sort of process through which we need to go. It is the starting point of impact on openness. There is an impact. What are the very special circumstances? I hope that's helped clarify the situation, Chair. Helen, is there anything you would like to add to that?
That's fine, thank you.
Yes, but you didn't answer my question. Well, perhaps I didn't ask the right question. Can I accept that proposal?
Oh, the motion.
The motion, sorry, yes.
As far as the motion, and this is a decision-making body. If it's seconded and if it's actually put, to members, yep. At the end of the day, as long as members are actually aware that, before putting that motion, they are clear on the issues that have actually been submitted by the officers and can actually clarify and robustly provide, the special circumstances based upon the submissions, made. By Kelly and myself. So
okay, so we can move forward then. So is there a seconder to that? No. Okay, well that fails then. Let's move into the decision-making process stage then. We've got the recommendation before you, and the recommendation is to refuse this application. All those members in favour, please indicate in the normal way.
7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Those against, please.
2.
1, 2. And any abstentions? Okay. Right. So that's good.
Recommendation is carried. The application is refused. Thank you, members. Just going to give 1 minute, just a moment. Members, one member's just left the room for 1 minute. I'll resume when he comes back. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, members, we'll resume the planning application committee meeting. The next agenda item is 22/00781 Bleak FUL, and it's Featherstone Hall Farm, New Road, Featherstone. Helen, if you can just summarise the application for me, please.
Thank you, Chair. This application site relates to an existing brick-built former agricultural building to the west of the host dwelling Featherstone Hall Farm. The site sits directly opposite the development boundary of Featherstone, which is a local service village. Planning permission is sought for the conversion of the building to provide 2 dwellings. The application also seeks demolition of an old Dutch barn and portal frame barn, which is in a very poor state of repair, to the north of the site, as well as the construction of a block-built garage, again to the northwest of the site. The proposal is a resubmission of a similar scheme which was approved back in 2019, which involved the conversion of the building into 3 dwellings, 2 with 2 bedrooms and 1 with 3 bedrooms. The current proposal would result in a reduction in the number of dwellings compared to this previous approval, proposing for 2 3-bed dwellings. Throughout the course of the planning application process, amendments have been agreed with the planning agent to preserve the original character of the barn. The principle of the barn conversion as a residential use is in compliance with policy GB1 and EV6 of the core strategy. The proposed direction of the triple bay garage would constitute inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. However, in this case, very special circumstances clearly exist to outweigh the harm. And these very special circumstances revolve around the extant planning permission where an identical garage has been approved. As such, it's important that substantial weight has been attached to this permission in the planning balance. The proposal would improve the visual amenity of the area, has adequate access, parking and garden areas, and would enhance and mitigate potential loss of habitats for protected species and will not adversely affect the adjoining occupiers. Approval is therefore recommended, subject to appropriate conditions.
Thank you, Helen. Local member, Councillor Cope.
Yes, Chairman, I'm happy with the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member? Any question? No. Anybody want to debate this further? No. Recommendation is to approve this application. All those in favour, please show.
Chair, that is unanimous.
Thank you very much. Application is approved. Moving on now to 22/00925 FUL 36 Sneed Lane, Essington. Helen, can you just summarise the application for us, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to a detached two-storey dwelling within the development boundary. The application proposes a single-storey rear extension and a first-floor side extension over the existing garage. One neighbour objection has been received on the grounds of loss of light, overlooking and loss of privacy and light pollution to their landing and associated window as a result of the first-floor extension. In policy terms, it's important to note that the landing window is not considered to be habitable, and the proposal would include a side-facing window serving a bathroom. Whilst it is acknowledged that the proposed window would be in closer proximity, the arrangement of the side-facing, non-habitable window between the property already exists. Following full consideration and subject to a condition ensuring that the proposed side-facing window is obscurely glazed and top-hinged if opening, the proposals are not considered to cause an impact on neighbour amenity to a degree that would warrant refusal of the application. It's therefore considered that permission should be granted for the proposed extension. So I'll just show you the photos of the site briefly. So it's the property right in front centre of the left picture, and the right hand side shows the application site and the neighbouring side facing landing window. This is the gap between the properties, and the two existing windows on the application site facing towards the side flank wall of the neighbour and the side facing landing window. And this is a view from internally within the neighbour's property up towards the landing window and out across towards the application site where the extension would be located. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We've got one speaker on this matter, and this is Nicholas Clark, who's speaking against the recommendation. Nicholas, you've got 3 minutes.
Thank you, councillors. First point I'll address will be the loss of light. The amount of light able to pass through the window will be inhibited. This has been compared at various times throughout the day. The landing window doesn't just provide light for the landing. It actually lights up the stairwell and gives a proportion of light to the main entrance hallway to the house. The aesthetics of my father's house were actually designed originally with that in mind, because he's got a frosted hallway door, which with the extra light from the landing means that we've got sufficient light in the hallway. So it was for this reason that we invited panel members to come and see, so that it would corroborate my father's account that at different times of the day, different varying amounts of natural light are afforded through the window. I note that similar extensions to the neighbouring properties have been considered in the application. However, I wish to raise that there are some noticeable differences. Number 38 has no side window. This concession was made in the design of that particular extension, so therefore there is a difference. Should this planning application be approved and the extension built, it would mean that significant changes would have to be made to father's home to potentially gain back lost light. The other particular point I'd like to raise is around the emission of artificial light from the side window proposed to bathroom into my father's property. As you may be aware, artificial light shining in through neighbouring premises could be considered a statutory nuisance in conjunction with the Environmental Protection Act 1990. It already does to a certain extent. I knew from growing up as a child there, if the bathroom light from the neighbouring premises came on, it would light up the entire landing. That's now going to be within 3 feet, which even with frosted glass isn't polarised. It will still allow the majority of that light out. Now, that would mean significant changes to the way my father lives his life now, such as he lives on his own. Because of living on his own, he sleeps with the bedroom door open because it means he can hear any noises throughout the whole house, such as burglars, intruders, things along those lines. In order to make sure that that light now doesn't shine through into a habitable area of his house, being his bedroom, he's going to have to close that door, which could put his safety at risk if he can't hear anyone trying to break into his house, amongst other things. Those are the salient points I wish to raise. The only thing I wish to add would be the old analogy of pictures speak 1,000 words. Well, in this case, the only way you can actually see how the light is affected is by personally visiting at various stages of the day. The opinion on the form is an opinion of only one person that's visited at one particular point for an hour in a day. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas. We've got local member Councillor Steele. Do you wish to speak?
Yes, please, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Good evening, members. I'm very disappointed tonight because my planning argument for calling in this particular planning application was going to be based on the site visit that I assume members of the planning committee would have made yesterday morning. But unfortunately, as you may already be aware, my request for a site visit was rejected. So in a nutshell, I'm going to find it extremely difficult to put my argument forward to you tonight. Personally, I've spent most of my working life looking at schedules and drawings and have a pretty good grasp of what is printed on a drawing will actually look like when it's built. But I doubt that everybody has that experience on this committee. But some things like the orientation of the main source of daylight won't always be obvious from a flat plan. I can't really add much more to what Mr. Clark has just said, really. He's put a very good case. But what I can't understand is why my reasons given for the call-in are not adequate for a site visit also. I have to say that I would much rather my call-in request had been rejected in the first instance, as my understanding has always been that the final decision rests with the members. But if the members aren't allowed to actually visit the site and see the orientation for themselves, it makes it rather difficult. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Steele. Well, let's talk about the refusal to allow a site visit, because that was made by me. I did take advice from officers, and I also did consult with a member of the planning committee to make sure that it wasn't me, just me being strange. Well, I referred to 5.421. And in there, it's the third line down. It says, whilst I sympathise and acknowledge that there will be some loss of light to the landing, in policy terms, the landing is not considered to be a habitable room, and therefore no weight can be afforded to this issue. So I was going to ask or approve a visit to the site whereby members could not afford any weight to the issue that we're going to look at. To me, it was a pointless exercise, and that is why I refused the site visit.
Thank you, Chairman, for that explanation. But surely I had to give planning reasons to have the application called in the first place. Now, they were deemed adequate because it's on the agenda. It does seem a pointless exercise, so I don't know what else to say, really.
I did have a conversation with you before you put your application in, and I had a conversation with you after you put your application in. I was hoping after my first conversation with you, you could have elaborated on the reason for the site visit. And you didn't. It was one line, and that one line, policy tells me we can be afforded, no weight can be afforded in this issue. So there was no point going to look at that particular site. And that was the decision I made. Okay, members, does anybody, other member want to speak? Yes, go ahead, Victoria.
I'm interested in understanding better about the fact that the hallway isn't a habitable room. Because as far as I'm aware, the loss of light is actually an important consideration for planning decision makers. So I'd just like to understand that better, please. It does seem to me that the chap's parent will have a significant blight to where he lives because of this. So I'd like some clarification, please.
No problem. Through you, Chair. Yeah, in planning policy terms, light is something we have to look at. Loss of light, loss of outlook, loss of daylight. So it is a material planning consideration, but only within the context of what we call habitable rooms. So these are lounges, bedrooms, kitchens, dining rooms. Things like utility rooms, landings, garages, that kind of thing are non-habitable. They're not a place where people dwell to spend a lot of time. So the policy differentiates between a habitable room and a non-habitable room, and there is no policy requirement to protect light, outlook or daylight to a non-habitable room. The reasons behind that is very much that if you had to protect the light, outlook, daylight to every single room in the house, it would be very difficult for anyone to be able to extend or make changes to their own property. And the planning system is a pro-development system. So we have to establish a hierarchy really when it comes to protecting loss of light, and landings are clearly defined as non-habitable. So yes, we accept there will be an impact on the light, but we can't afford that any significant weight in the decision-making process. Thank you, Chair.
Victoria.
I'm really sorry to push the point, but who decides? If I want to go and sleep in my utility room, that's my business. So I'm just trying to understand who decides that that is policy, that a landing isn't habitable. If I want to sleep on my landing, I don't see why I shouldn't.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's a fair point. And what we would do as part of the site visit is obviously assess how rooms are used. Now, I think it's worth making clear that the case officer did visit this site, hence the photos that we've got. So you can clearly see that's a landing. It's affording light to a staircase, not to a habitable space. And it's not used as a bedroom or as an overspill to a bedroom. The bedroom would have its own window, so would the lounge downstairs, the dining room. So that is non-habitable. That's not being used for someone to dwell in terms of sleep or use as a lounge. So it's non-habitable. And we do have to be clear about that in policy terms and what we can and can't protect. Thank you.
Any other member questions? Gary, Councillor Steele.
It's not a question, Mr. Chairman. It's no one's really said why I was allowed to call the application in, because I had to give planning reasons for that. But then it depended, you know, my argument depended on a site visit. I wouldn't have called it in if it, well, I shouldn't have been allowed to call it in, should I? Full stop.
Well, if you'd have said that on your request for the site visit, if you'd have added that extra sentence, I would have probably said yes, but you didn't. You just mentioned loss of light to the landing. You didn't say what you've just said. An extra sentence would have made me change my mind. Anybody else got anything comment to make on this? Just Victoria, just a moment. Kelly, go ahead.
I'm just going to come back on your habitable room because I found it, just to say it's in the core strategy policy of what a habitable room is. A habitable room is defined as all rooms excluding water closets, bathrooms, utility rooms, landings and hallways. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that explanation. No, okay. Penny, go ahead.
Just a brief question. Looking at the neighbour's landing, is it possible for that window to have a blind or a curtain at night? Because one of the things that was mentioned was intrusion in the evenings.
I can't answer that one. Can anybody else? Yep.
We couldn't condition something along those lines, Chair. It just wouldn't be reasonable. It's not a planning matter. You know, these are private matters as to when people want to put blinds up and when they want to, you know, put curtains up. So I think the answer to that is that it just wouldn't be a planning issue.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought the argument given by the applicant's son was that it was lack of privacy rather than light, because he couldn't have his bedroom door open because of its being overlooked. With presumably while he's in his bedroom, he'll be overlooked if he can't open, he can't keep the door open.
That was certainly mentioned, so I'll ask Helen.
The argument, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
Helen?
Yeah, I think the objection relates to loss of light and privacy. As you can see, that view that you can see there is from the neighbour's property, the objective neighbour looking out towards where the extension will be. There's already 2 windows there. When it's extended, there will only be 1 window, albeit it will be closer, but we have attached a proposed condition, which will mean it will be obscurely glazed and top opening. So there will be no intervisibility between the windows.
It's part of the planning permission, is it, that obscure glass is used? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Steele.
Thank you again, Chairman. It was just to say, the picture there, you've got to remember that wall we're looking at will be 3 metres closer. So Helen's already said that. So, yeah, it will be 1 metre away from that window.
It will indeed be closer, you are correct, because that's the location of the extension, but it will only have 1 window, which will be obscurely glazed and top opening. That's correct.
Okay. Does any other member wish to speak on this matter? Recommendation for you is to agree this application. All those in favour, please indicate.
Sorry, I'll start again. 1, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Those against? Any abstentions?
The application is approved. Thank you, members. Now move on to the next application, which is 22/01009 FUL, Pendiford Hall Farm, Pendiford Hall Lane, Coven. So, Helen, if you could just summarise the application for us again, please.
Thank you, Chair. The application relates to a steel portal-framed agricultural building situated southwest of Pendiford Hall Lane. The site is situated in a rural area characterised by open fields around 2 miles from Coven Village and 1.5 miles from Codsall. The Shropshire Union Canal Conservation Area is immediately to the west of the site. This application proposes to demolish the agricultural building and replace it with a terrace of 4 dwellings. As the site is within the green belt, the development is inappropriate in principle. However, in 2020, the existing building was approved for the conversion to 3 dwellings under prior notification. And in 2021, before this committee, permission was granted to replace the existing building with a terrace of 3 dwellings in exactly the same dimensions and design as the prior approval. The only difference being that it would be of new brick construction rather than a conversion. The prior consent and as a fallback position was considered and in that case holds significant weight. It is now proposed to replace the existing building with a building of exactly the same dimensions and height to provide a new 4-bed dwellings, each with a private rear garden and frontage parking. Although the development is inappropriate in principle, both the extant permissions are capable of being implemented, which is considered to hold significant weight in the balance of considerations. There would be no undue harm to the openness, function, or amenity of the Greenbelt as a result of the proposal, and there are no concerns arising in respect of heritage assets, ecology, occupier amenity, or highway safety. Overall, taking all these matters into account, the balance is in favour of the scheme, and on that basis, approval is recommended.
Thank you, Helen. We've got local members, Councillor Diane Holmes and Councillor Sutton. Who wants to go first?
At all to refuse this. Thank you.
And I concur. I have no objection and agree with the officer's recommendation.
Does any other member wish to speak? Councillor Cope?
Yes, Chairman. I'm actually speaking on a point of clarity. If members look at page 46 at the bottom, 5.74. What that first paragraph says is the application proposes a garden to each of the dwellings measuring 6.7 metres in length and between 51 square metres and 59 square metres, which is substandard to the council's requirements. I would like to see if we quote this type of thing in the future to actually say what the council's requirements are. I believe in this case it's probably 65 square metres. Therefore, the measurement of 59 is nominal, I accept, but 51 square metres is 14 square metres below 65. Why I say a point of clarification, in future reports, can we point out to the members what the actual dimensions are, rather than just say it's substandard? I know that's a point of clarification. Thank you.
Yes, good point. Thank you.
Very fair point raised, Jen, and I'll make sure that's fed back to the team and duly noted. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Steele, yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, on that point, in actual fact then, if there's one garden that's only 51 square metres, that's actually 20% below the recommendation. So yes, I think it should be pointed out, because percentages mean a lot more than just 51 and 59. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member? Okay, then let's move forward to the decision making. The recommendation is to approve the application. All those in favour, please show. The application is approved. Thank you, members. Okay, the final application tonight is 22/01056/COU, and it's 2 Pennyford Mill Lane, Bilbrook. Helen, if you can summarise the application for us, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The proposal relates to number 2 Penderford Mill Lane, located on the south side of the highway, just past Lane Green Road. There is a short lay-by, former bus stop, on the southern side of Penderford Mill Lane that abuts the property, as well as the adjacent business to the east. On the west side of the property, there is parking that is shared with the adjacent former bank. This forms the northern end of the Bilbrook chicane, leading to further shops and services at Duck Lane, extended towards Codsall. This is an application to change the use of the property, which is a current vacant retail use, into a hot food takeaway, as well as associated external alterations. The application notes that the proposed use would have 10 full-time employees and 15 part-time employees and be open from 11 till 11 every day. There have been a number of comments in support of the change of use, but also several objections from neighbours and from the parish council. Both County Highways and Environmental Health Team have recommended approval of the application. After considering all of the comments received, it is important to recognise the sustainable location of the proposed use, as well as the other established uses within Bilbrook that provide a similar service with comparable hours and parking with limited issues. As such, it is considered that the proposal represents sustainable development within an easy accessible location to Bilbrook and Codsall. Minimal modifications are proposed to the external appearance of the building, which would align with the existing character of the area. Given efforts made to address potential fumes and waste collection, the proposal will not have a material impact on neighbouring amenity. So on balance, the proposed change of use to number 2 Penderford Mill Lane is acceptable and recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Helen. Councillor Sadler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are a number of objections to this property being converted in this manner, but the main problem, as perceived by the local people, is the traffic that it will generate on that particularly awkward junction. And at specific times of the day, it will also, we presume, lead to quite a number of delivery vehicles, by which we mean Ubers, things like that, being parked there for considerable periods of time, which really the site can't sustain, in my opinion. For that reason, Mr. Chairman, I'm extremely reluctant to see this go through. I really feel that we should not be granting permission for it. In fact, I will go so far as to say I will move refusal on the grounds of traffic. I understand the difficulty of defending that, but the traffic is a matter, as much of anything else, of perception, and we perceive it to be a dangerous change. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go further, I just want to ask Ellen to read out some comments that were received too late to be put on the report. So we'll get the planning agent up first. Planning agent, Stacey Pester. Stacey, I apologise for forgetting you. You've got 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Stacey Pester and I'm from Pegasus Group. The applicant has worked in a positive and proactive manner with the Council's professional officers throughout the course of the application and has responded to any concerns which were raised. The main concerns that have been raised relate to the impact on neighbour amenity, proximity to schools, the concentration of food outlets within the village and parking. Conditions have been proposed to ensure that there would be no detrimental impact in terms of noise or odour by ensuring that the development would not be brought into use until the approved fume extraction and odour control system has been installed in full at the premises. Given the operator is a pizza takeaway, the cooking processes used are baking and not deep fat frying like other hot food takeaways. Therefore, odour and grease will be kept to a minimum. A noise assessment was submitted with the application, which demonstrates that there would be no unacceptable level of noise from plant equipment. Furthermore, a condition has been suggested to restrict the opening hours to 11 AM to 11 PM every day. This is in line with other uses nearby, including the Woodman Inn public house. The pub is open from 12 PM to 11 PM every day. Pizzarelli's, situated approximately 45 metres to the north of the site on Bilbrook Road, is also open until 11 PM. It is also worth noting that the unit could be opened as a restaurant within Class E without planning permission and could be open until 11 PM or later. They would also require extraction equipment and create similar levels of vehicle movement to and from the site, particularly if they also offer a takeaway service. The site is located within the village retail centre associated with Bilbrook. The closest school is Bilbrook Middle School, the entrance of which is located approximately 450 metres to the northeast of the site walking distance. There are no existing policies restricting such uses within certain distances from schools, but regardless of this, the site is well separated from the nearest school. Furthermore, there are other hot food takeaways nearby, and therefore the proposal would not introduce a new use within this area. With regards to parking and traffic generation, there is an existing area of hard standing at the front of the site which provides space for both staff and customers to use through the proposed opening hours. Deliveries to the unit can be made using the redundant lay-by on Penderford Mill Lane, which is in close proximity and would only be used for a short period of time, a small number of times a week. Furthermore, the Council's Highways Officer did not object to the proposals on highway safety grounds. In terms of concerns regarding vermin, domestic sized bins will be used and regular collections will be made to reduce the accumulation of waste and prevent vermin. Furthermore, bins will be located within the internal bin store and only wheeled out on bin collection day. The unit is vacant, creating a dead frontage and offering nothing to the visual amenity of the area or local economy. The proposed external alterations would be an improvement on the existing situation where high quality materials will be used.
Thank you very much, Stacey.
Thank you.
Helen's now going to read out two letters of objection. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a combined statement that I'm going to read out on behalf of two objectors, Mr Andrew Onions and Mrs Gravel. In this day and age, we are all aware of fast food takeaway shops and are not primary for local walk-ins and pedestrians who have got the munchies on the way home from the pub. Takeaways are mainly a hub for deliveries and multiple delivery drivers. The application appears to openly admit this. We therefore question the need for this kind of hub to be located in this residential area. We are concerned that the application, if approved, will be a source of noise and antisocial behaviour in a mixed residential village centre and are concerned it will result in multiple and varied vehicles, mopeds and cars, and their drivers congregating in and around the location whilst waiting to be sent on their next deliveries. We are very surprised that the part of the application openly suggests that they will make use of the land that is not part of the property and part of the public highway. Presumably, this would not be permitted unless the applicant either purchases or agrees to lease the area. We are worried that this bus stop lay-by will become a de facto drive-through for delivery drivers and collections. The junction itself is a very busy one, comprising a chicane of 2 sharp bends and 2 side roads, and is sandwiched between 2 zebra crossings. This is already a complex and dangerous junction, particularly when using the crossings. An increase in the volume of users by introducing cars and mopeds joining from a number of directions only increases the risk of accident. We are concerned this development will not be so much for the benefit of Bilbrook Village, as I am led to believe we are already in the catchment radius for deliveries from this rumoured franchise, but it's possibly more to support an outreach into neighbouring villages such as Codsall or Brighton, Brood and Coven. We are concerned that those supporting the application appear to have knowledge of the franchise, something not contained in the application itself. We are concerned that this is due to them being connected parties to the applicant and would hope that appropriate verification in place is to ensure their support is relevant. We believe the Parish Council is right in its concerns of an over-concentration of takeaways in Bilbrook Village, and also worry that his rumoured franchise is correct and there will be a detrimental effect on the independent takeaways we have in the village, including an already established pizza takeaway. We are also worried about the big name franchise, that it is not in keeping with the village. We worry that this approval could be used for future years to justify planning applications for a McDonald's or similar, and this would end the village vibe that this has nearly already been lost. We have a number of independent traders who not only run a business and provide a product and service, they also contribute to the village in other ways, volunteering and providing support to both individuals and village events. In my humble opinion, this needs to be supported and not have the rug pulled from under them. Most Bilbrook residents take pride in their village. It is unique. It might not have the money of Codsall or the charm of Brood, but the people you talk to, they talk to one another and support each other and look out for each other. Organisations such as the Friends of Bilbrook, alongside committed residents, look after the village and pick up litter and tend to public areas. It is unfair to expect them to do this to support a large international franchise, and we fear this will be lost and they will be no longer done, and this cost will then fall to the council. For full transparency, I am not part of the Friends of Bilbrook, but notice and give thanks for what they do. If this application was to be approved, we would hope that it would be with conditions that are enforceable, such as no idling rule of mopeds and cars, signs to remind customers and drivers they are in a residential area and to keep noise to a minimum, a commitment to provide resources to pick up any litter they are responsible for, and a commitment to increase and improve and maintain the green areas, including the wildflower garden, and to provide green screening that will assist in reducing noise, discourage rubbish, and reduce the impact of having such a big name franchise in our village. We understand that it is a difficult decision to balance the disadvantages of having a vacant shop in a prominent position in the village versus having a possible occupant, even if they are not quite ideal for the village. However, we would caution against this application. We worry that Bilbrook will not be what it was with a big name and will force out what we currently have and only result in a multiple vacant properties further down the line. Finally, we have concerns with the close proximity to the Bilbrook War Memorial being directly on the junction. This can be extremely busy as ceremonies are often held there for people to pay their respects. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you, Helen. Members, you will remember 5 or 10 minutes ago, Councillor Sadler made a proposal to refuse this application. Have we got a member here that will second that proposal, please? Councillor Penny Allen, do you wish to speak now?
Yes, certainly. This is a dangerous junction. Has a history of accidents. I'm very concerned about the parking particularly. The bus pull-in that's been designed to the north of this property is well used and there's frequent service. If this application is allowed, then vehicles may well be reversing onto Penderford Mill Lane out of parking spaces because there is not sufficient space to park in alignment with the road. I have already experienced that myself when in its former use, where vehicles were reversing out on this bend virtually. The parking space, if it's used, the parking space for the buses, if it's used, the buses would obscure the view of people exiting this car park onto the junction into Lane Green Road or into Duck Lane. And because of the volume of traffic that's been generated by the I-54 and the proposed increase in traffic along this route, which has not been mentioned in this application by County Highways, and I think should have been taken into consideration. Whenever we enlarge our industrial sites, we also have to think about increased traffic. I'm concerned that it's quite possible that the bank space, which is now vacant, may well be used for car parking. But should an alternative use arise for that bank space in the future, then the car parking space there will be immediately narrowed. The bollards that are, if you can just go back to the photograph, please, with the blue bollards in the car parking space. With them. You'll note there that the car is in alignment with Penderford Mill Lane and parked in the bus car parking space. That is an in-out entrance, so drivers have clear visibility when they're exiting onto Penderford Mill Lane of the traffic approaching. If you park in front of the store, the parking has been quite haphazard in front of the front doorway. That traffic is sometimes reversing off that parking space into the traffic on the bend. I'd also support the parish council in their refusal to have yet another fast food outlet in this village. I think from my own point of view, looking at the number, and they're detailed in the parish council's objections, looking at the number of other fast food outlets in the village, everybody in this room will understand that that creates litter. It also creates nuisance at times. And although there is a public house across the road at Woodman, which has late hours as well, I also think that frankly in darkness, when people are trying to navigate into that and out of that car park with no entrance and exit to it, there will be some difficult problems, and I expect the amount of litter in the centre of Bilbrook to increase accordingly. I think we do have to take seriously what the parish council has to say about this. They know and live there. You'll note that we've already got a chip shop, a takeaway, Indian takeaway, an Indian restaurant, a Chinese takeaway, 2 cafes, a sandwich bar, restaurant and a pub within very close proximity. And I do believe that there is an overabundance of properties that are let for this type of outlet. So I would fully support the parish council in their proposal to refuse this application. I think we do have to listen to local voices, and I think this is an inappropriate use, certainly a danger to the public passing through with the parking, as well as on a dangerous junction that's already noted for its inability to cope with existing traffic, and is it expecting increased traffic with the new part of the I-54? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Yes, before we go into the debate, does any member want to ask any questions about the application before we start? Yes, I'm just coming to you in a minute, Brian. Okay, just Brian. Go ahead.
If you look at the photographs there, you can see that there's the bank, and there were three people were able to go into there. And at some stage, somebody's going to take on that property, and that space will become their space again. The area looks pretty good in front of the place there, but if you look on the drawings, please look at it. There may be, when I've been there many a times, you may be able to get 2 or 3 vehicles in, but you've got to get back out the same way and come back in by the side onto the road again. And as it's already we said, Penford Road and the roads there, that's one of the worst little road areas, not only in there, but anywhere I can think of. And I'm amazed that somebody thinks that people are going to go in there and go into there. I think it's a crazy place to be putting food in there. The shop that was there before sold motor cars and stuff. But when people generally go to there, they either go up the road and across the road where there is a car park, or where I go, where the vet is, another, again, the other road. But no way at all would I be willing to think that anybody sensible would be allowed to have that area for that use, Chairman.
Thank you. So no question, it was just a comment. Okay, let's. I didn't hear a question. Sorry. Let's move on. Does any member wish to start the debate? No. We've got a proposal to refuse this application that's been seconded. Do members want to vote on that now?
Chair, can I just, sorry to interrupt, in relation to this application, I do think it's important that Helen has an opportunity to address some of the concerns that have been raised. From a legal perspective, before the application, before the motion is actually determined, it is important for members to give clear, precise, sound planning reasons for it, which I'm yet to hear. So, you know, that is very important. Helen, is there a few you want to come in on? And in particular, in dealing with the determination of this application, what I would actually also invite members to do, which I'm sure Helen will actually elaborate on, is the other uses within Class E, which are actually possible without the need for a planning application. And there's a whole raft of uses which, you know, we will specify, and that needs to determine your that needs to be borne in mind before you actually deal with the refusal motion. So,
okay.
do you want to say anything? Is that okay, Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Pardip. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it's just worth being mindful that we've got 2 vacant units here, but they both have established uses associated with them. It's an E-use class, as we call it in planning terms. It gives a really broad set of options in terms of what could happen here without any planning consent whatsoever. So that could happen tomorrow without any consideration from us as officers, you guys as members or as a committee in terms of that final decision-making process. So you can see the one was a bank and the one was a retail shop. Change of use could occur without any consent being required into a cafe or a restaurant. That could happen overnight. A restaurant is perfectly entitled to have ancillary takeaway, so takeaway element to it, as long as that's not the primary purpose. The reason we have a planning application in front of us for takeaway is because that's the primary purpose. So that falls outside of the use class. So I think it's worth being mindful that they've been vacant for a while, so it's been a situation where there's no comings and goings. That could change at any point. And in terms of highway safety, the bus stop pull-in that you can see there on the left-hand side poster is a redundant bus stop. So it was a previous bus stop, it's currently redundant. Having spoke to County Highways, they'd have no plans or are not aware of any plans to reinstate it as a bus stop. It's currently redundant. So that would be subject to the normal highway restrictions as part of any part of the highway. But I just think it's important to say that, yes, we note that they are vacant at the moment and they've been quiet, but they have established uses on them and they could be brought into reuse at any point. And there is an important point about properties sitting vacant and being brought back into active use. In terms of highway safety, just a final point from me, Chair, we need to be clear the County Highways have no concerns about this. We appreciate local knowledge is important, but the accident data has been reviewed and the parking standards have been reviewed and they do not raise any objection. In terms of trying to look forward at and defending an appeal, it's a technical reason. If we don't have any justification for that, it's quite a dangerous situation in terms of defending an appeal. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Kelly? Bardi? No. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Penny-Allen, you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you. Just to say to everyone that in the Bilbrook Parish Council comments at the top of page 55, the NPPF paragraph 109, it has a reference. Sufficient parking spaces for staff and customers. And that is the principal reason that I do. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? Helen? No? Councillor Carroll.
Yes, Chairman. What parking allocation to this type of premises? We have got policy, haven't we, of how many parking spaces are available, as with pubs, cafes, whatever. What's the standard for these premises? How many parking spaces?
Through you, Chair. So in terms of what's proposed, it is it's short on the standard, but it is within a set village centre. So we have to take that into consideration. It's a sustainable location. So the policy does allow for a reduction. In terms of the officer negotiations, they've made sure that the cycle provision is in, so there's alternative methods of transport for staff. But it is short when you look at it purely in policy terms, but given the centre location, that allows for a reduction. So that's the reason why the highways team are not concerned about the amount of parking. There is parking to the frontage for the half of the premises, and then the pick up and drop off within the lay-by in terms of deliveries. But yes, in policy terms, it is short, but that's thoroughly justified by its location within the centre. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, questions, debate, any further comment? Yes, Philip.
Thank you. I've heard all of the points made about parking, etc., etc. The thing that strikes me is it's going to create 10 full-time jobs, 15 part-time jobs. A lot of the arguments I gathered about parking, I'm looking at various stats, are that a lot of this the services offered by this sort of establishment will be actually done by, as has been mentioned, by drivers, i.e. Deliveroo, Uber, etc., etc., which apparently is the trend now. And also, if approved, it will go from a horrible derelict building with rotten windows which looks awful on a very nice high street there, into a bright modern operation, which I think has to be good for the village. And you know, with the jobs and what have you, it's got to be a big improvement for the whole village. So that's it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Adi, if you want to speak.
Yes, just Chair, very quickly. The reason for refusal that has actually been put forward is insufficient parking. What I just wanted to make sure that members were mindful of is that this will be a very difficult reason to actually support at appeal, and it is likely that an appellant, may very well put in a cost application on the basis that insufficient parking has not been supported by the county. The county, clearly are happy with the proposal. Also, when an inspector chair looks at this particular application, it will be looked at in the context of what the fallback position is, what other uses can be carried out within Class E, and also, what traffic issues actually arise in relation to the current use. So I just wanted members to be mindful that there really isn't going to be the evidence to support a reason for refusal based upon insufficient parking, and then for that appeal to be successful. But clearly, at the end of the day, Chair, we advise, and the decision rests with the members. Thank you.
Chairman,
Yes, go ahead.
may I ask what county actually said about the place?
Do you want us to read out what the county has said?
Yes, okay.
Through you, Chair, I will respond. So we've got, it says in the beginning of the report, County Highways received 8th of the 12th and clarified via 16th of the 12th, recommend acceptance. The proposed development is located in a residential area with an existing vehicular access to a parking area. The road is classified and subject to a speed limit of 30 miles an hour. There are additional parking facilities close by. Vehicular movements associated with the proposed use are similar to that of the previous use.
Councillor Steele.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Quite a lot of these establishments have a rather garish sign. What is our policy regarding, like you see some shops, booze and fags in, 2 foot high lettering. I'm not suggesting they're going to be called booze and fags, but is it going to be Geno's pizzas plastered 3 foot? What is our policy on signage, if I may ask?
For you, Chair. Yeah, in terms of signage, obviously most businesses will look to put signage up to attract attention to their business. There will be consent required, advertisement consent generally for signage, but there is what we call some deemed consent. So some businesses can put signs up without requiring consent, but there's quite a strict framework what they have to adhere to in order to do that. Anything outside of that would come to us for consent. What we can't do though is control the letters, so what it says. So we have no control in planning terms to say whether we think a specific name or a title of a shop is appropriate. We have to kind of go with what's suggested. So we don't have any planning remit over that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Just to say that at 564, it is acknowledged that it does not have the number of car parking spaces specified within the adopted core strategy for a hot food takeaway of this size. And it says that negotiations can be entered into to see if these could be achieved, or a suitable compromise reached where public safety will not be prejudiced. The matter I'm raising is also public safety as well as public.
Thank you, Penny. Do you wish to respond, Helen?
Yeah, just to say that obviously we had that discussion about a reduction, and because of it being the local centre and highways, county highways don't feel like there is a public safety issue. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Okay. Nobody else wish to speak? Let's put it to the vote then. All those in favour of the amended,
Can we just be clear? Sorry. There's been a debate, and we just want to be have a clear reason for refusal, so your officers can write it down and ensure that it's appropriately documented.
Should we ask the proposer?
Sorry. Yes, yes.
Lack of parking and road safety.
May I provide the references for those? Adopted course strategy, Appendix 5, and in the Billbrook Parish NPPF, paragraph 109.
Okay, pick someone's up.
Sorry about that, Chair.
Yeah, no problem. That's what you're here for.
Right, okay, so you're going to put it to the vote?
We are, yes.
Okay, so
All those in favour of refusing this application, as per Councillor Sadler's proposal, please acknowledge now.
2, 3. Those,
All those against?
please. 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Any abstentions?
Okay, that proposal is lost. So we'll move to the main recommendation this evening. I'm presuming nobody else wants to speak on the main recommendations. No. Well, all those in favour of the recommendations, which is to approve this application with the, when I find them, conditions, please vote now.
5, 6, 10, 11, 12, 13.
Thank you.
Those against? 3.
3.
Abstentions?
No. Yes, we'll record that. Thank for you. Okay, the application is approved. And Councillor Steele. Okay, then all those 3 members wish to be noted. Okay, we've come to the end now of the planning applications. We'll move forward to the next agenda item, which is the monthly update report from the lead planning manager.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the monthly report covers the usual items around training, changes in national policy, appeal decisions, and also the planning team's update on performance. Turning first to future training, we have got a number of items that we are looking at bringing forward in coming months, but obviously conscious of PERDA coming and elections. So again, working around what we'll be doing this side of elections and post-elections. We have got items identified for the planning balance as well as planning enforcement. This evening I've been asked to do a future training session on Cannock Chase special area conservation and the processes through which we go. A lot of work has gone on there, so we'll put that into the list and bring that forward quite soon. Also, one to be aware of that's coming out in coming days, hopefully, is a Section 106 mandatory training for parish councils for anyone that wishes to receive or be in receipt of any Section 106 monies. We are increasingly seeing a continuous misunderstanding, and they're the same threads that keep coming from parish councils, and we're starting to see some quite large sums of money coming in, and we need to make sure that obviously we follow due diligence but also help parishes to understand their roles and responsibilities in terms of financial management and implementation of those monies and the risks that come with it. So that'll be something that's run not necessarily from planning, but from planning being arranged by legal, but also colleagues in our finance team will also be there to try and help parishes understand the responsibilities through which Section 106. Do you mind? Thank you. Moving on, so we have then got, so that'll be coming out in the next couple of days. Hopefully, we're just trying to get the last arrangements. We're hoping to arrange 2 separate evenings because we're aware parish council meetings are on a number of nights. So we're going to try and do one on a Wednesday, one on a Thursday. Then everyone has the opportunity to attend. It will be hybrid, so those that want to come here and talk to us will also do it virtually. So everybody who wants to receive monies at any point in the future can come and have that conversation. Turning now to changes in national policy, this report was written before MPPF, so obviously that is one that's now coming out. Whilst it hasn't changed policy, it is looking to change. There's a consultation underway. We are in the process of preparing a draft response for members' consideration. That will be coming, I'm sure, in coming weeks, and further conversations can be had around that. Turning now to planning appeal decisions, there have been 3 appeals since the last committee. The first of which is a refusal for a single and 2-storey side extension in Wilmot Close and Featherstone. The appeal was dismissed. The inspector concluded that the proposal would have a harmful effect on the character and the appearance of the area in conflict with our plan, and therefore it was dismissed. The second appeal relates to an enforcement notice, which has been a long-standing case for the council, which related to the alleged breach of planning, which was without planning permission, the material change of use to the land and associated unauthorised development, engineering works, and to facilitate the change of use, including, but not limited to, installing a garden pond, hard standing base, siting of a shipping container, fencing, raised levels of land, a lot of domestic paraphernalia, and that was in Baggeridge Close in Gospel End. The appeal was dismissed and the enforcement notice was upheld by the inspector, and the land has now needs to return to its former condition, and they've got a period of 6 months. It's a really good a decision for us as a council and the works of the enforcement team. And if you haven't read it, I would encourage that you have a look at it, because it's been really helpful in helping us to understand what is appropriate action to take. And actually, that's a window in which they've now got to return the land back to the former use. It is really positive for us in terms of maintaining the need to take enforcement action where necessary. There has been one change that the inspector made, which was around tree planting. The inspector felt that even though they had removed a lot of trees, the enforcement notice didn't need to make them reinstate the trees through tree planting. But all other elements were upheld, and actually quite complimentary about the positive and proactive work we've taken to try and resolve the issue. There were 2 separate cost applications put in, both by us and by the appellants, both of which were dismissed. The final appeal relates to a detached carport and storage in Castle Street, Kinver. Again, the appeal was dismissed and the inspector concluded that the proposal wasn't acceptable and would have had a harmful effect on the character of the area. In reaching that conclusion, the inspector did do a planning balance exercise to look at the cumulative benefits, but actually didn't feel that they outweighed the harm that was being proposed by that, and therefore it was dismissed. Turning now to enforcement, at the time of this we went to print, we hadn't updated our enforcement statistics because we were doing them for various quarterly monitoring. We have now done that and we're actually at 85%. We did have a slight downturn in performance simply because we went through the process before Christmas of closing down some old cold cases, which therefore were outside of the 12-week target and brought down the statistic. I'm pleased to say we're now back up to 85% and actually have the number of open cases down to about 180. We are still working through an internal service review, looking at our processes, streamlining our approach and comms with customers, and I'm sure further information will be coming out as that process goes on, and perhaps we'll be leading into a member update training session around the enforcement policy and the way in which we communicate the works of the enforcement team. Finally, in terms of development management, we've got an update on our statistics and our performance. In terms of speed, we are now at, for major applications, at 92.6, and we need to be above 60, so obviously doing well there. And for all other applications, we need to be above 70, and we've gone up to now 87.2%, so improvements in both of those. In terms of quality, which is the overturns at appeals, majors, it's at 1.9%, we need to be below 10. You'll note that says June 2021 because there is an update to that, but it's wrong, and we've tried to contact DLUC because it's saying that the whole country is at 0%, which is marvellous if it was true, but I don't actually believe it. So, so we're sticking with the June date until they look at it, which is 1.9%, still brilliant performance. And then for other applications, again, requirement below 10%, and we're at 0.9%. So that concludes my report, Chair.
Thank you. Questions from members?
It's not a question actually, Chairman, but I just wonder if I could raise something while we're here. I don't know whether you can do anything about it in your committee, on this committee, but it's concerning in relation to the last planning application on about takeaways. I'm sure the parish council have got all the reasons, good reasons why they didn't want this. And I'm quite sure there's a number of parish councils in the same boat, because we'll end up with all of our little high streets in our parishes being takeaways of some description. And I'm concerned about that, because it takes away opportunities for other businesses to actually come into our communities. So I just wonder if it might be for a future conversation to actually raise this. Obviously, it's all about employment as well. We're also mindful of the fact of healthy eating and healthy habits these days. So the more takeaways, etc., that we have is obviously not good. I know from experience in my own village that on the precinct there's a number, as you know, Chairman, they're all fast foods now. And though it's good competition, it's concerning for local residents when we're trying to eat healthy and be good to our kids. And there are hot spots of red when it comes to unhealthy habits. So I wonder if it's worth throwing it up now as a conversation to be had, perhaps in the future, that we could have with parish councils as well, as to what we can do, if anything, to prevent all of our high streets, our little communities, being overrun by the big corporates of fast food takeaways. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. You're quite right. It is no pun intended, hot topic, and it has been for years. Through planning policy, we have looked at it, and if we go back through some of the member workshops we've done on policy choices, it came out quite loud and clear from quite a few members about whether we could do something about it. We have looked into it over the years. There are some authorities that do have similar policies. Where they have them, they have the health data to support the perception, and we're back to that word that we've mentioned, perception, that hot food takeaways lead to childhood obesity. We don't have that data. We've looked at it, we've spoken with the CCGs. There is no correlation in our area. There may be for other areas. Some authorities have proceeded with doing an SPD, for example, on trying to restrict them, and then appeals come along and just say, well, they've got no right to say that. It's a real difficult area. It's something we're constantly monitoring, and when we meet with the CCG particularly, through looking at policy formation for the local plan, it is always a topic of conversation that we look at. Where it's very difficult is that we can't, through the planning system, stifle competition. So if a shop is there, and as Pardip and Helen have said this evening, the use classes are now so generic. I mean, we were just looking, they changed again at the back end of last year, that an E-class, which is what we were looking at, can actually be doctors, surgeries and health centres, and the parking for that, you know, but they can do that without needing any planning permission. So the idea of these use classes being sort of made more generic is to enable far more change and competition than planning can get involved with. So there's very limited we can do to stop hot food takeaways in the sense of from being a shop or something else, because we haven't got the data to substantiate restrictions.
Just come back, Chairman. Can't we do it through maybe our local neighbourhood plans, for instance? You know, we're all, I'm assuming, doing a neighbourhood plan of some description. Can't we incorporate it in that kind of conversation? I just think it's important that we don't lose some of our good businesses in our small communities to fast food takeaways for everything. Yeah.
I absolutely understand where you're coming from, and you know, I can totally sympathise with that. It's what can we do in planning terms, and what are we allowed to restrict? So neighbourhood plans, we have one in Bilbrook, one in Penkridge, one in Kinver, and one designated in Codsall. But again, neighbourhood plans have to do the same as local plans and be substantiated by evidence, and that evidence isn't there. It's, you know, we have looked to try and see, and if a neighbourhood plan put a policy in to restrict hot food takeaways purely on the basis of it being a hot food takeaway, then whoever's examining the neighbourhood plan would have the same issue as whoever would examine our plan. When, you know, where is the justification for this? Now, I do absolutely understand where you're coming from, but that's why we've looked at it so many times over the years. But there has to be a justification in planning terms make that happen. Where we've seen it work before is particularly around business forums with landlords and encouraging them for social responsibility. That's always, which is not a planning side, and that's it. And that's why it's not a planning matter. That's where we have seen a little bit of success elsewhere in the district, where a tenant landlord has chosen to, but I say planning can't govern that.
I mean, the county council have got loads and loads of evidence about way children particularly eat the wrong sort of food. So, I mean, if you want to start working with that, we've got county councillors here that can do that. I'll come to you in a minute, Penny. Yes. We're talking about it. Yes, thank you. Victoria, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that one of the cabinet members for health and wellbeing at the county council is actually working on a project to try and work with all the districts and boroughs in the county to try and achieve what it is Caths are after. So I don't know if maybe approaching it from a public health point of view as opposed to a planning point of view might be the way to go. So I don't know if Cath wants to have a conversation with Paul Northcott, because he's leading on that. So just trying to be helpful.
I think the chairman of the Health and Wellbeing Board is Councillor Sutton, isn't he? Isn't he? I thought he was chairman. No, not you, Mark. I'm talking about. He's chairman, isn't he? I thought he was. Anyway, Penny, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yes, just briefly. This sort of information should be in our localities data, surely. And if we need to get some data from the county council to support it, it's very well known that both gambling, fast food, and those kind of shops are proliferant in fairly deprived areas. And we already understand that Billbrook has some area of deprivation.
Yes, you can.
Thank you, Chair. Just to be clear on what the issue is, we're not saying that there isn't data to say that there's childhood obesity issues or that in deprived areas there is a proliferation of certain types of uses. Where the planning system can't set down law or rules or policy is that you can have a fast food takeaway 300 metres from a school but not 400 metres. That's the difference. We know there's data to say district-wide, locality-wide, there is childhood obesity. There is no direct correlation with that fast food takeaway being the fault of that obesity and because it was 200 metres from the school as to why that's the planning issue, not the overall sense of childhood obesity, obesity generally and use of fast food. It's that direct link that makes it necessary for planning to do something about it that we don't have. So just to be clear on that wider, we get the wider issue, it's what can planning do?
Councillor Steele.
Last one, I promise, Mr. Chairman. Getting back to the second appeal notice, what happens if the land isn't restored to its previous condition as per the enforcement notice within 6 months? What's left open to us to do? Can you be?
Legal prosecution. Yeah. We will take them to court. So we're in contact with them in order to, we appreciate for those that are aware of the circumstances, it's quite a complex case. And we are aware that removing the imported material that has been put on the land is going to be challenging because of a neighbour dispute. So there will have to be a pragmatic way of dealing with it. So we're open to work with them if 6 months is not suitable, but they need to be making actions and showing that they are implementing the enforcement notice. If they continue to not implement the enforcement notice, then we will prosecute.
I've got one then. I saw an email recently about the 5-year housing supply. We used to be at quite high level. Now we're down to 5 point something. Can you just give me some update on that?
Good question, Chair. And perhaps one I should have mentioned, actually, so apologies. Yeah, so we issued yesterday or today the latest update on the 5-year land supply. So it is currently at 6.08, which obviously is down from last year. We are mindful that we do need to keep on top of that because, as a matter of fact, the site allocations document is building out quickly. So we are going to see that dropping quite quickly in the coming 12 months. Subject to, obviously, we're going to be talking to members about the MPPF consultation and what happened. That's part of the reason why we were pushing forward with the local plan, was to maintain our 5-year land supply. So obviously we need to look at what that may look like in future years. Subject to whatever comes through the MPPF, there are proposals that we can maybe be okay to have a lower land supply and still be protected. So we need to consider that in the round and what our response is to the consultation. And also at the same time managing the development industry to be reassured that, in terms of putting in speculative applications to try and bolster our 5-year land supply, that we don't need that at the moment because we have a strong 6.08 year supply, and that's what we will protect. We may get some development challenge to that to try and bring that number down to make their case, but at the moment we'll have to wait and see on that. But it's a strong position for us to be in for this year, but be mindful that that's coming to an end because of the nature of the supply of housing in South Staffordshire.
Thank you, Kelly. We come to the end. Thank you, members. Thank you all for your cooperation tonight in this meeting. Safe journey home.